So, what were my top ryes of 2023? Stay tuned to find out. Welcome back to the Bourbon Retriever, where I go on the wild, hunt bourbon, and bring it back for you. Today is one of my favorite episodes to film. It is the top ryes of 2023. I get to go through and taste some of the best ryes that I was able to get my hands on that came out this year. So every reviewer who puts out a top list of bourbon or ryes, they all have different criteria for their list. For myself, it couldn't be a store pick. It needed to be something that you could go out and get either through trading in your loyalty points, maybe hunting on secondary, something that just needed to be a wider, more distributed product. For instance, I was not able to include this Sagamore pick. It was a pick done by the Mash and Drum and a couple others at an event they held at Sagamore this year. I absolutely love this pick. It's one of my favorite Sagamore products. It basically is an old fashioned that is just not watered down. But given that this had very limited distribution, you had to go to the event or show up shortly after at the distillery to get, I didn't feel it was fair to put on this list. Now, the second criteria I had isn't really a criteria. Some channels require them to get a full bottle, and I completely understand why that is, so you can taste the product several times. Myself, as long as I got an ounce of it, I was able to do the blind and go back to it if I needed to for a little more if I was A/B tasting. And to me, I felt comfortable including 1 ounce sample bottles because I want the list to really reflect the bottles that came out this year. It's really hard for myself to get every bottle. One, just availability, and two, the price of collecting all the bottles would be quite astronomical. So getting the samples is a little more cost efficient while at the same time creating a more well-rounded list. And the main reason I chose these two criteria is the value I get from other people's lists is it helps guide my purchasing decisions. It helps me understand which bottles I should ask for at the end of the year. And if a bottle comes first on a list that is missing, 2, 3, 4 of the major players, it's really hard to know exactly how good that bottle is because it wasn't compared against some of the other major releases from that year. The last thing I will say though is everyone's palates are very different. As we go through this list, I think you'll get a better understanding of exactly where I come from when I look at ryes. I am not a rye fan. If you are a rye lover, your list is probably going to be drastically different from mine. I enjoy ryes every now and there are a couple characteristics about ryes that I particularly just don't enjoy. A lot of times on ryes when they're younger, they taste very hay or just a ton of baking spice and black pepper on your tongue. And then also a lot of times, ryes to me can be very one-noted. That's why you'll see a lot of ryes that get finished in different barrels to help make the drink a little more complex. So some of you may be wondering exactly how I did my blind. I got a friend to pour all the bottles out for me, labeled them A, B, C, D, E, F, G on down the line. So when I first approached the blind, I nosed and sampled each pour down the row from A to G, E, or whatever, exactly how many letters I had. And as I nosed and drank it, I would say whether it was better or worse than the pour before it. After I had my preliminary list, I started A-Bing down the line. I started with last place and next to last, A-B'd those to see which one's better, and I moved up the line until I got in first. And I'm really glad I did the A-Bing because when I first go through the list, it's kind of hard to remember exactly how each pour tasted. And when you can go back and forth from A-Bing them, you really get a better understanding of the different intricacies of each pour, what you're enjoying more, maybe what you're not enjoying, and it's much easier to, in a concrete vacuum between two bottles, to say which one is better or worse. And as part of this A-B tasting, one bottle on this list drastically moved up, and I'll talk about that bottle when we get to it. All right, with that said, let's go ahead and get into the list. All right, coming in last place today is the Sagamore 8-year. Now, this one was an upset for me. I thought this would have done much better. I know it actually came in first place for Mash and Drum this year, and I think Bourbon Junkies might have had it in fourth or so on their rye list. It is a rye that a lot of people in the community love. It is a great value. It's $80 or so for an 8-year age-dated product, coming in at that $10 a year age statement, especially for an MGP juice. It has decent proof on it. I think it's about 111, 114, somewhere in there. But I think the problem for me ultimately came down to is this is a rye. If you enjoy the rye notes, I think you would really love this bottle. To me, it was just a little too much rye for my personal preference. But if you are a rye fan, this is a bottle to get. And when I look at my notes for this bottle, I do mention that I got some oak notes, which makes sense. It's an 8-year age-dated product. I think it might be one of the older age-dated products on this list, and mostly a lot of rye notes in here. So for me personally, I think this bottle is a bar pour try to see if it's something in your warehouse. For me personally, it doesn't really fit my profile, so I'm not sure I'll be buying a backup of this. Okay, next on this list is a sample, and it is this year's Jack Daniel's Twice Barrel Heritage Rye. So I know with the sample bottles, it can be a little difficult to understand what I'm talking about or follow along, but with a little bit of YouTube magic, there's the bottle, and hopefully it can help you follow along with what I'm talking about just a little bit easier. So the JD Twice Barreled Heritage Rye wasn't exactly my favorite this year. I did love the nose though. It was amazing. A lot of toasted marshmallow, a little bit of chocolate. I just absolutely loved the nose. But when it came to actually drinking the whiskey, there was just a lot of rye notes, and the nose just did not transition to the palate at all. That might have been exactly what it was. It was a little jarring, the difference between the nose and the palate, and maybe it just threw me off a little bit. So to me, this was another bottle that didn't exactly live up to expectations. Everything that Jack Daniel's puts into that heritage bottle is normally absolutely fantastic, but this one wasn't really hitting me right, and I'm really glad I got a sample because I don't think it's a bottle that I'm gonna chase down. Okay, coming in 6th place today is the new Bardstown Orgin Rye. This is the first shelf-stable bottle coming on this list, and it beat out two, I would say, slightly allocated bottles. The JD Heritage is an allocated bottle. It's pretty hard to get. Sagamore 8-year, you can get it relatively easy in Maryland. Outside of Maryland, I think it is a little harder to get, and I always love it when a shelf-stable product beats out allocated bottles. It just goes to show that you don't need to go chasing the FOMO. There are plenty of great bourbons and ryes just sitting on the shelf out there. There isn't really a markup on this. I think this comes in around $70, which is pretty fair for a rye. It is slightly over. I think this is a 6-year age-dated product. There is some finishing time in cherry oak barrels. So my notes on this one were sweet, low proof. I think this actually is the lowest proof bottle in this blind. There might be another one that's pretty close, but I think this is the lowest proof whiskey on here. I wrote apple, which is a little weird. It is finished in cherry oak barrels. I went and tried it again afterwards, and I did get that apple again. For some reason, those cherry oak wood, to me, it gives off more of like a green apple taste. And then last I wrote very little rye, which makes sense. The less rye pronounced baking spices notes I get, probably the more I'm going to enjoy it. So this Origin series just came out this year, and I'm really excited to see how this line goes going forward. I really hope we start seeing higher age-dated products coming out of Bardstown, because at 6 years, if it's this good, I can only imagine what it's going to be like at 8, 9, 10 years. And next on the list is another sample bottle. It is the Michter's Toasted Barrel Proof Rye. Michter's Toasted Rye is an allocated product. It is relatively hard to get without paying secondary for it. The MSRP on it is $120, but on secondary, I think they're going closer, maybe $175, maybe up to $200, but I think I've seen them go a little less than that. But coming in 5th place today, I did enjoy this pour. This is a bottle I would consider buying a full one of. I did enjoy it, especially for that $120. I think at $200, I would pass on it. For me, the Bardstown Origin, this, and the next one on the list were all relatively close. So the fact that I can get the Origin for $70 always sitting on the shelf, it's gonna probably stop me from getting this on secondary, but I would pay up to $120 because I did enjoy this pour. So for the notes on this one, I wrote candy and sweet. I didn't get much rye on this one. However, the reason it didn't finish higher on this list is the finish. I just didn't enjoy the finish as much as I enjoyed the finish on bottles higher on this list. Okay, coming in 4th is the 2023 E.H. Taylor Rye. My friend got this in the Virginia ABC lottery, so that's how we were able to get it on the list here for 2023. One of the interesting things about this E.H. Taylor is I believe it is the only Buffalo Trace product that has 2 DSPs on it. If you look on the back, it has the Buffalo Trace one and then also the Barton one. I wonder if they're distilling it at the Barton and aging it at Buffalo Trace, or vice versa, or something going on there. If people know more in the comments, let me know. But I thought it was a little interesting that there were two DSPs on this. So as I was going back through my notes, this was one of the bottles I was actually more excited about that I got a note on, and it was cherry. Cherry is one of the more prominent notes on Buffalo Trace products across their line. So the fact that I was able to pick out just made me feel a little better by myself. I also wrote light cinnamon and some baking spices, which you would expect on a rye. So the H. Taylor ryes are rather difficult to get. They're allocated products like mini Buffalo Trace. They're hard to get. It should be about $80, but secondary on them is closer to $200. I don't think this is a $200 bottle. I did enjoy this. This, I think, is a good $80 bottle. Like I said, I really was splitting hairs between this, the Michter's Toasted Rye, and the Bardstown Orgin Rye. And the fact that you can get the Orgin Rye for about $70 really limits me paying up for this one when I can just get that one on the shelf. But I did enjoy this bottle, so if I can find it for an MSRP, which I probably won't, but if I did, if it was offered to me, I would pay it because I did enjoy it more than the Bardstown slightly. All right, we are on to the podium. And coming in third place this year is the Michter's 10 Rye. So the Michter's 10 Rye, it is the oldest HJ product on the list today. It is also the most expensive one on the list, coming in at $200. I think the secondary on it is closer to $300, maybe a little bit below that. And when I went to look at my notes, basically all I wrote was sweet. It was a very enjoyable pour, a ton of nice natural sugar to it, and I got absolutely zero rye spice. You could have convinced me that it was a bourbon, which happens to me a lot with the barrel proof ryes from Michter's. In those blinds, I almost always think they're bourbons. And I get a lot of more light spring rosy vibes out of this bottle. Not necessarily floral vibes, but it is definitely on the lighter side. It is not a dark, rich pour. Now, would I go out and buy the Michter's 10? If it was offered to me over everything I've already said in this list, I would go get it. I did enjoy it. I know it is almost double the cost of everything else, but to me, the top three in this list were very differentiated from the rest of this list. It's kind of hard to kind of show that visually. You see a list 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but to me there was a big gap between 3 and the rest of the pack. However, if you can get your hands on the Michter's barrel proof ryes, I would much rather have 2 of those than one Michter's 10, but they are roughly the same product. I just think the value is there for the Michter's barrel proof rye. So while I did love this Michter's 10 rye, it does not stand in comparison to the Michter's 10 bourbon. I tried those side by side when I did a tour of Michter's earlier this year, and Michter's 10 bourbon is just on a different level. If you're offered the choice between the rye and the bourbon, 100% pick the bourbon. So number 2 in this list is another shelf-stable product, and it is the Jack Daniel's Single Barrel Barrel Proof Rye. These bottles are absolutely fantastic, and the great thing about them is it is another shelf-stable product. In my region, across Maryland and Virginia, they're showing up more and staying on the shelf, which is something you absolutely just love to see, especially for a bottle that comes in up on second place on a list. It also comes in a very reasonable price of $70, which is the same price as the Jack Daniel's Single Barrel Barrel Proof Bourbon. In my notes for this one, I just wrote hot with 3 exclamation points, not rye, and hot. Those were my notes. This bottle came off extremely hot. This Jack Daniel's Rye came in at roughly 10 proof points higher than almost any bottle on this list, and compared to most bottles, I think it was closer to 30 proof points. I did cherry pick this bottle. I've had about 8 or so Jack Daniel's barrel proof ryes this year. Personally, I have 3 in my collection, and this is the best one I've ever had. The reason this one wasn't higher is because of the proof. While it was hot, and sometimes I really enjoy a barrel proof pour, this one to me came off just a little too hot today, especially compared to other pours. It really just kind of blew my mouth out, and it was kind of hard to get some of the flavors. So thinking back, actually maybe some of the other Jack Daniel's barrel proofs that are a little lower in the 120s might have done better on this blind. The main reason I think this bottle did finish so high on my list is it just doesn't taste like a rye. Me and my friends, we do a yearly Advent at Christmas time where we blind 25 different pours, and everyone except basically one person said that this was a bourbon. It just doesn't taste like a rye. Now, before we get to what was my favorite rye of 2023, if you're enjoying this content, hit that subscribe button. I'm trying to grow to 1,000 subs. Also, I have some great content coming out in the next couple weeks. I have my honorable mentions bourbons, my favorite bourbons of 2023, and I got a review of the George C. Stagg from this year coming up. You're not going to want to miss it. All right, and lastly, my winner of the 2023 Best Rye is the Parker's Heritage. I was absolutely shocked that this bottle won. I thought this was going to finish much lower. I know this bottle has gotten mixed reviews from people, and mostly the people I've heard from that don't like it are people that just don't like ryes. But when I drank this, I didn't get almost any rye notes. The aroma was a nice, deep, rich wood. I got a little bit of chocolate on it, and that nice aroma transferred almost perfectly to the palate. It was one of the best ryes on this list where it went from transitioning from the aroma to the palate. It matched absolutely perfectly. This is coming in at 128 proof, so it had a nice viscosity to it, kind of coated your mouth, and at that proof had a really nice finish. This definitely was the most complex of all the drinks I had and was the most oak prominent. Probably the only other one that was as prominent was the Jack Daniel's Twice Barreled, but the nose on this and that were just night and day. In my notes, basically I wrote so good with 1,000 O's and a ton of exclamation points. I absolutely love this bottle. The price on it is rather steep at $180. I would pay that $180. In fact, I was at a Virginia drop about 2 months ago, and I had the choice between the Parker's Heritage Rye and this Old Fitz 10. At the time, all the reviews I read on the Parker's were that it was a rye man's rye. So knowing that and that I'm not a rye fan, and I just didn't have any Old Fitzes, I went with the Old Fitz that day. But now after tasting this and the Old Fitz, I definitely made a mistake. Now when it comes to secondary on the Parker's Heritage Rye, I think right now it's a little under $400. I wouldn't pay $400 for it. Going to spend $400, which I am very much inclined not to when it comes to whiskey. It would be most likely a bourbon and not a rye. I think this Parker's was drastically better than many things on this list. It did taste like a special pour. If you pop this open for a special occasion, people would be able to recognize that there's something different about this bottle. So for that, I would feel comfortable paying up to anything under $220. But unfortunately, the secondary prices are much higher than that. So that was my list of the best ryes coming out in 2023, with Parker's Heritage taking the crown and Jack Daniel's coming in a very close second. But if you're really enjoying this content, before you head out, check out this video or this one. And until next time, cheers.